Hi everyone, my name is Sean Powery, and I've spoken with Mark from Talk Beliefs about giving this piece of content to him. So I've been interviewed a few times on Talk Beliefs. I live in Sydney in Australia, and we've done a couple of interviews. I'm an ex-Mormon. As anyone who follows Talk Beliefs, this channel, you'll know that the channel is primarily concerned with talking about beliefs, different belief systems. Mark often does a bunch of interviews with people from various religions and ex-religious, and takes care of debates and things like that. And so I'm actually, as you could tell, I'm in a car and I'm with a good friend of mine, and we're on our way to an event which happens to be an ex-Mormon conference of sorts that is happening in Canberra tomorrow. So we're in Sydney, Australia, and we're driving to Canberra, and unfortunately there's been a big accident. So we thought we'd whip out the camera and have an interesting conversation, which we will donate to Talk Beliefs, and we want to talk about a couple of hopefully interesting topics to do with religion. So that's my introduction. I'm actually here with my friend who's driving. His name is Daniel. Hey Dan, how's it going?
Very good, apart from the obviously very slow traffic.
Yeah. So we were just driving along on the road, and I said to Dan, why don't we record an episode to send to Talk Beliefs?
Yep.
And have some fun in a conversation. So just as a bit of background, as I mentioned, I'm an ex-Mormon. I've had a couple of interviews on Talk Beliefs channel, and I was once a missionary in England, in Manchester, and I talk a lot about that with him. Daniel, my friend here, is an ex-Anglican.
Ex-Anglican, or broadly speaking, Evangelical Christian. I left about 5 years ago. Ironically, after studying the Bible at postgraduate level at the Catholic University. So an interesting but not particularly unique way out. I think you know, the closer you look at some of these things, the more that the issues that are hidden in plain sight rise to the surface. So
yeah, perfect. Yeah. So we thought it would be a good idea to have a short conversation, or a couple of conversations, about a few topics, and we'll donate this content to Talk Beliefs. So actually I had one idea with you before, but I think maybe it would be more fun to talk about another one. So why don't we just quickly switch the topic? This is completely extemporaneous. We haven't prepared anything. What I want to talk about is the genesis of a faith transition. In other words, what is it that causes one person to begin the journey out of their religion and another person not?
Yeah.
Like, how does all of this kind of stuff begin, right? So I think that would be a cool thing to explore, and we can both tell a bit of our stories, sort of going way back, back to when you were a religious person.
Yeah. What
is it that happened in your life that caused the doubts to start arising and issues to be put on the shelf that eventually crashed your belief? So do you want to start with you or start with me? Talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess though the important thing is, and this might be taking off on a slight tangent, you can't really talk about, I don't think, the way that you exit a belief system without also considering the way you went in.
Okay. Yep.
If that makes sense, because I mean, take for example myself. I was raised in a somewhat of a Christian home. It wasn't particularly strict. It wasn't particularly conservative. But it was in my later teens, and I think this is interesting. And it's a certain age where you've got a lot of questions about life, and you want answers. And religion provides a lot of these answers for the questions you begin to start asking. And along with that, obviously there's other things, like say for me, for example, I wasn't the most socially and outgoing person, and so religions do provide you a community. They do provide a community which meets a great need. A community which in the case of Christianity, the people are compelled to like you. They're compelled to be your friend. So even the most socially awkward can find a friend or two within that kind of religious community where they might not outside of that.
Yes. Yeah.
So not only does it provide simple answers to the complexities of life, but also an instant community of people who you can get on with. Now, this is a saying, of course, that, and I did mention at the start of this, the way I began exiting was to do a course, a postgraduate course on studying the Bible itself, because you don't study the Bible or the history or whatever when it comes to religion before you make a decision.
Yes.
Right? You know a little bit. It's kind of summarized down, and I'd like to say whitewashed.
Yeah.
And it's presented as something which is how can I say this? It's presented as something very appealing, something that will solve all your problems.
Yes.
And all ironically, to use this saying, the devil is in the detail. No detail is gone into, you see.
Yes.
You don't go into this going, well, this Christianity sounds interesting. I'm going to study their holy documents, or the holy book. For the next 12 months, I'm going to look and explore every avenue available to me, etc. You don't, and then come to a decision at the end.
You are given. So that's a really good point there. John DeLynn, who runs Mormon Stories, a podcast that I really enjoy following, he speaks about how religions create a so-called simplified narrative. This is very, very important. In sales, this is important too. When you're selling any kind of product or service, you need to distill down someone's problems into sort of core statements. Both of us know this because both of us are marketers, actually.
Well, yes, that's right.
And so you need to create a problem for, create or articulate an existing problem.
Exactly. And then
which is often similar, same thing.
Exactly. A real or perceived problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. And then conveniently, you have the solution.
You roll out the solution.
The solution to the problem. Yeah. But hurry.
Your soul is at stake.
This offer is limited.
Your soul is at stake. Jesus wants to save you today.
Yeah, well, that's a classic thing. I don't know in the Mormon Church, but certainly in Evangelical Christianity, if there was a talk, you see, and bring your friends along to a talk, and they get someone to do a gospel presentation. Often the we call it call to action in marketing, right? What if you died tomorrow? What if you died tomorrow and had to face God? You can't afford to wait a moment. You don't know when your time will be up.
Yes, absolutely.
So yes, it is.
You're on a timer. You have to be saved before death, right?
It's a classic marketing. It's like, here's the problem. You're going to hell. Right? Conveniently, we have a solution to this, right? Jesus took your punishment on himself, died for your sins, and by accepting him, you will pass over that and into eternal life. But you must act today, because who knows?
Act now, or the atonement doesn't apply.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? You might not be here tomorrow. So yeah, it's classic. It's a classic marketing pitch, isn't it? Classic advertising pitch.
So yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the kinds of, because I think it's very relevant. I'm going off a tangent, off your tangent, which any of the one who's watching this video, I hope you learn to enjoy that, because we do that a lot.
Well, yeah, that's right.
So
what would be a conversation without a few tangents?
Yeah, eventually we get lost and forget how we started the conversation. But anyway, the questions that youngsters ask that religion answers, these are actually fair questions to be asked, and
absolutely.
And I think one of the biggest problems, this is one of my critiques of modern secularism, is that secularism doesn't have a very good viable alternative to religion. What I'm saying is, the closest I can think of is something like a TED conference, where you get people sharing great ideas and having performances and so on. But it's not structured in such a way. Religion has had a long time to get this right, to sort of organize and structure, add structure to the way you convey your message, right? And secularism, I guess the best we have is schooling in terms of that, but that has its weaknesses too.
Yeah.
So the questions that you ask are things like, what is the purpose of life, right?
Yeah.
Is there an afterlife?
Why am I here?
Why am I here? Where am I going?
Classics. Yeah.
Where did I come from? You know, why does humanity exist? Why does the earth exist? And these are all interesting and relevant questions to be asked, right? These are not trivial questions. And I think one of the things that makes religion appeal to youngsters who are, as you said, between ages of say 16 to 25 or whatever point they reach this, one of the things that makes religion appeal so much is that it offers ready answers to these questions, and they sound very certain.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
This is what it is. It's this way. This is the purpose of life. Whatever and so people are attracted to that because they want firm answers to these difficult questions, right?
Well, yes.
So anyway, yes. So yes, it's good that you said the devil is in the details. When you're a teenager and you know you're asking these kinds of questions, you're not going to go learn about the JEPD theory of the first few books of the Bible, right?
No.
You know, when they introduce you, they're like, so by the way, Moses didn't write Genesis 1 and 2. In fact, there are two separate authors. You know, the missionaries themselves who told you didn't know that themselves.
Well,
right?
often it can be the case, yes.
Yeah. So this again, this is the problem. So let's go ahead. So I mean, let's skip all of the details of our previous religious lives, and talk about how we started to come to a place as people where we started to question things.
Yeah.
So for you said the first thing is that, I mean, I agree with you. People who choose to be religious don't make the choice with all the variables at hand.
No.
Especially not the critical arguments against their beliefs.
No, well, that's exactly right. I mean, if you're invited along to, Evangelical Christianity has their alpha courses and this sort of thing. You go along, you watch some videos, you have a meal, all nice people, etc., etc. But people don't come out of that thinking, okay, now I've seen that. Now, where's the skeptics version of this?
Yeah. I'd like to hear what the skeptics think.
Where's my 12-week video course? With followed by dinner and discussion on why the arguments
against the Bible or against Christianity or
these things aren't around. So people will go 12-week course and it'll appeal, and again it's like it's food and fellowship and these answers are presented, and it's in a wonderful, friendly environment. It is genuinely a very appealing option. And so at that point, tick the box, say the prayer, accept the offer. And then this is the thing, and then you will be drip fed is the wrong word, but you will find things out. You maybe in a home Bible study, and there'll be things that go, well, that's not quite right.
Yeah.
And if your home Bible study leader is a good one, they will have a ready answer to explain this away. Now, see, when these problems arise, and and it's like drip fed, if you like. There's never enough cognitive dissonance.
Yes,
you see.
Yes. Not in one bucket.
Not in one bucket. So you're able to just get over that one little thing, and then the next one little thing will come up, and you can get through that. It's when, and this is going back to my experience, when this is presented, as you say, instead of drip by drip, the whole bucket's dumped on you all at once.
It looks very incredible indeed, right?
Suddenly, I'm talking about the issues, right? The issue,
right.
When the bucket's dropped on you at once instead of just a drop, drip, which can be dealt with. And that led to me, as I said, I did a course, postgraduate course in biblical criticism, essentially. Well, they call it Bible studies.
At a Catholic university.
It is a Catholic university, and to their credit, they did present the Bible
as a historical document. No presuppositions as to its divine origin. Yes. And suddenly, all these issues, which I didn't even know were issues in some case, suddenly, there they were, right up in my face. Yes. And this caused some cognitive dissonance.
A serious amount, and this is the thing. It's the degree of it. It's the degree. It's the serious amount of it, and these things weren't being able to just bopped on the head, like they were previously when it was kind of just one thing here, one thing there.
In the little seminary situation.
It was all at once. So that funnily enough, a lot of the things which we study, you mentioned the JEPD theory.
Yes. Which you told me about.
Which I told you about, and which, I mean, that's, yes, the people have presented arguments with that, but there is no doubt that the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, were patched together either by a single author doing it, some people think, or whether it's multiple editors putting multiple narratives together. It explained a lot. The explanatory power, I got very excited. It's like, well, this explains why the 2 accounts of Genesis, which never quite matched up in my head. This is brilliant. But all those things which suddenly made sense to me meant that this book, which I had been told was the holy word of God and is inerrant and inspired and everything, it meant that the document wasn't what my church background had claimed it would be. Error-free. The inerrant word of God. Every word is true, cover to cover. And the fact that the New Testament claims that Moses wrote these books, again, there you go. So that's a real problem. Then, of course, we go on to New Testament, and I know we spoke about this before, Luke, the author of Luke, who claims to have done a very careful investigation to present Dear Theophilus with the facts, and then goes on pretty much in the next chapter to make a mistake of, pardon the pun, biblical proportions, because he claimed that the census that got the Holy Family from Nazareth to Bethlehem took place in the time where Quirinius was governor of Caesar and King Herod sat on the throne, and they missed each other, we know, by 10 years. and I looked for answers, because I didn't like hearing that, of course. That actually, I remember there was an option to actually write one of our essays when I was in this course on that, or we could have done the Old Testament. And I was like, I can't do it. Like the Old Testament, I can say, there's some stories and metaphor. I get that. I can deal with that. But when you start saying that the New Testament got historic facts wrong, I didn't even want to go there. And so that was a while later. I sort of picked that up and had another look and went, well, actually, there's some real problems. And nowhere could I find anyone with any credible solution to explain how a census, empire-wide, by the way, happened while Quirinius was governor of Caesar and King Herod was king of Judea. And once this is the problem with inerrancy. When you find one thing wrong, you only need to find one thing wrong with inerrancy, and it makes the document errant.
Yes.
It only takes.
It's no longer inerrant.
You hold it to such a high standard.
And it doesn't meet
that. It only takes, and to quote the words of Jesus and referencing St. Paul, a little yeast ruins the whole batch. Right? Or
what an ironic verse in the Bible.
Or if you break the least of these commandments, you've broken the whole law. It's if you cannot be trusted with small things, then how can you be trusted with large things?
Like census dates and who was king,
etc. So real problems. And
but I want to pause here for a second, take a step back, because the topic that we're discussing is the genesis of a faith transition. And I think you've said something which we've sort of blown over, but I want to take a step back there.
Sure.
You had a choice when you were doing this biblical course to do an essay on the New Testament or on the Old Testament.
Yes.
At the time, you chose to do the Old Testament, right?
Yes.
Now, at some point in the future, after doing that essay, you turned around and you said, I actually want to look at the problem with the New Testament. And so what I want to talk about here, an analogy that anyone who's watching this will probably know, is the Matrix movie, where Neo is facing Morpheus, and Morpheus has the 2 pills. And the blue pill, you can choose to wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want. And the red pill, what does it say? You follow me down the rabbit hole and see how big it is. Right? And I want to say that the one of the most important parts of the faith transition, or the genesis of a faith transition, is every religious person along the road will bump into contradictory information.
Yeah.
And they, as you described in your sort of seminary situation, apologetics will be wheeled out and it'll satisfy you for a time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the difference between someone who transitions and someone who doesn't is that the person who transitions takes the red pill.
Yeah.
And so sooner or later, you said, wait a second, I might have done the essay on the Old Testament, but this New Testament thing is still hanging around in your mind. This is an issue,
yes,
right? And it's bothering you.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And so you make a conscious choice to look, right?
Yeah.
To look and to learn and to ask difficult questions.
Yes, that's right.
And this is the very genesis of a religious faith transition. Is the willingness to take the red pill. The willingness to say, hey, I was in this because I believed it's true in the first place. And so now I'm going to pursue the truth to whatever end, right? I don't know if you agree, but that's sort of one of the most important parts of the beginning of the journey.
Well, it is. And look, it was kind of going back maybe 4 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a little bit hazy, but I certainly remember with this, for example, I wanted to know. I mean, the course can only cover so much. It was one subject. I wanted to know more, and so I went on the internet, right? Went on the internet looking around for answers. Funnily enough, the JEPD theory almost had nothing online, or certainly nothing on YouTube. I remember the only thing that I found on YouTube was a preacher who was speaking against it as Satan's work, right?
Satan is discrediting the Bible.
Satan's work. But then I found a podcast by a former Christian minister, I believe, who talked on a range of issues with the Bible, and I found him talking about JPD, but he had a whole slew of podcasts available, and so as I listened to more, the New Testament was kind of brought back into, brought back to me again in the terms of, it was a kind of ask, a question and answer style podcast. People would write in questions, and obviously people had other issues in the New Testament. In searching for answers,
you bump into more questions.
I bump into more questions, and so more and more issues, and this is what's happened. I guess I got out of the echo chamber. Can I put it that way?
Yeah.
And when you get out of the echo chamber, you are going to be hit with all sorts of things you either didn't know or didn't want to know. And of course, going to church, for 20 years on a Sunday and home groups on a Wednesday, and not. That is an echo chamber. Actually.
It is,
you don't
information control.
Control. When you get out of that, and I guess that's one of the things the difference that the internet has really made now. That is a lot easier to get counter examples. I mean, I was in the 1990s, you just couldn't get. I mean, the internet is nothing like it was today. You just couldn't get. You couldn't get access to these counter arguments. You couldn't hear the other side of the story. So you'd go and ask someone at church, who'd been to college, or the minister or the assistant minister, and of course they were just going to reinforce the narrative, the dominant narrative. Now, I mean, I think that's one thing the internet is, is fantastic for, is sometimes you have to look hard, I can't deny that, but you can find alternate views which are very well articulated and well presented, etc.
You can find good old Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and
Christopher Hitchens who will live on. Who lives on.
His ideas live on.
His ideas lives on. Immortalized on the internet and YouTube in particular. So and this is a difference. It was the first time I was really confronted, without actually going looking for it. By the way, I said I did the course as part of a teaching course. I didn't go.
Correct.
I didn't go looking for problems with the Bible.
You just bumped into them.
I can assure you. Yes.
But to be fair to yourself, I mean, there's conceivably in an alternate universe with another Daniel.
Yes.
there's conceivably another version of you who bumped into the problems
Yep.
and then said, oh, let me find the solutions one by one, the apologetic method.
Yeah, well,
one by one,
well,
and then you
course.
come up with some kind of
Yeah.
intellectual workaround for each problem,
Yeah.
and then you just stop looking. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, that's fine, that's it. And then you went on to become a teacher in some Anglican school, and
Yeah.
it could have all worked out. But the thing is that you had a desire to know what the truth is,
Yeah.
and so you just kept inquiring, kept looking.
I did. It's it's one of those things. But funnily enough, and if I can just add to that, it wasn't simply the problems with Scripture. You see, this is it. But this is where the other side of it comes in. There's theory and there's practice, right? Now, in my own personal life, one of the reasons I'd gone into teaching is because, as you mentioned, my professional background is marketing. After the GFC, it was actually very hard to get a job. There were a lot of marketing cutbacks, and I was going from contact to contract, but with months in between. And as you know, being unemployed, putting in 50 applications just to get one interview it's not a good place to be. And despite all my prayers and supplications, etc., etc.
Yes. God did nothing, unfortunately.
Well, it seems to be that. So it wasn't just an issue with the theory, although that was a huge issue. When it was coupled up with, for example, prayers not being answered, and not just one or two. This is years, and not for like I want a new Ferrari in the garage. It's can I please have permanent work? Kind of very basic requests.
Yes.
So these things married together.
Keep going straight. Yeah.
Took again, it was one of these things. It was one of the things. The problems with the theory, but then also practice. And you thought, well, if the theory's wrong, then that explains why the practice isn't working.
Yes.
Right? And I'd had plenty of evidence. But of course, again, with prayer, as you would know, that God never doesn't answer prayer. So the apologists go,
something wrong with,
yes, no, or not yet.
Not yet.
And we like to explain away these things. Why these horrible things happen? Well, God has an even better plan for you than you thought. The God, as St. Paul says, can what's the phrase? It's beyond our imagination. He can do things.
In Isaiah, doesn't it say that my thoughts are not your thoughts, or my ways are higher than your ways, kind of thing? That's right. That's exactly what's wheeled out every time.
And I think St. Paul,
question's asked.
And I think St. Paul is like, God who is capable of doing more than you can ever have imagined. I'm paraphrasing there. And I remember thinking to myself at one point, I don't want that. I just want, could you just give me just what I imagine? I don't want greater than I imagine. I'm quite happy just for what I can imagine. Can we make a deal there? So it became apparent to me, like if the theory didn't work, it explains why the practice didn't work either. And of course that got into the whole issue of the question of theodicy, why bad things, why there's so much pain and suffering in the world. And then I look at my own situation, all right, like I didn't have a full-time job. Forget that. How about children being sold into,
sex slavery in China.
These things. It's like, and it's going on all over the place. We're actually quite isolated from it in the West, in my opinion. When we see examples that we're horrified, we're mortified, people calling for, the death penalty. But this is there's a charity I support now, if I may mention, Blue Dragon, which deals exactly with rescuing mainly young, I don't want to say young women, girls who were sold up the creek when they're offered good paying jobs in China, and they end up in a brothel or forced marriage or something. And I'm like, why do these things happen? Isn't the world actually? And you kind of start playing with these ideas, and you feel guilty as all heck when you do. It's like
when you're opening your mind, you're like, what if I'm wrong?
What if I'm wrong?
Am I betraying God?
All this stuff. Like, isn't one of the things that a phrase I picked up somewhere? It's like, isn't the world exactly how you would expect it to be if no one was in control?
Yeah, that's a Dawkins thing, I think.
Oh, is it?
Says that,
Well, I heard that.
The universe is exactly as you'd expect, with no order, no God, no, all that stuff.
Well, and it really is when you look at, forget hell, how about hell on earth? Like, this is happening.
Some people have hell on earth.
And despite the prayers, despite the... it goes on and it continues. So that was, and that put really put my issue of not having a permanent job into perspective. How could an all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God actually allow this to happen? I mean, you and I see examples, and the whole thing, of course, with the priests, with the Catholic Church in particular, the whole sex scandal.
Yeah, what's the movie called? Spotlight.
You know, which was the one in Boston, but of course here in Australia we have it. Well, the Royal Commission here, basically the numbers, it's 7% of all Catholic clergy are abusers.
Child abusers.
Let's call it child abusers. Which actually, it's a huge figure, and it's not just, of course, that it's the way the Church, of course, handled it, by hiding it, by moving the people around. 7% is still a horrific figure, but it was a way that it completely wasn't dealt with. Almost complicitly continued. With full knowledge of the church, or at least the senior clergy. Horrible things. Why would God let a child in his own church?
The one, again, taking a step back, probably the greatest evidence against God is the existence of religion, basically.
Well, yes. And it all became, I guess, at that point, everything became quite man-made.
Yes. It unravels rapidly. To answer our original question, at least I'm summarizing our conversation so far.
Thank you. Give us the
executive summary.
Exactly. The executive summary.
The first point that we've made here, among the others, about the beginning of a faith transition is the running into contradictory evidence. And this includes the sex scandals with Catholic priests. That's contradictory evidence, right? All these things, having some doubts, but then having the courage to actually go and face them, and go and learn more, basically.
Following the evidence, as it's wherever it leads. As it's been said.
Yes. Keep following them. So
the scary thing is thinking it might lead where you might not expect it to, right?
Yes, that's the hardest part, actually.
Embracing that.
So that's great. I'll share then briefly from my side how it started for me. Again, going to the Genesis, we haven't really talked in great detail about the actual contradictory evidence. Maybe just some brief points,
or just some of the old favorites.
So for me, it was interesting, and it's sort of similar to you. Firstly, I think for religious people who have some kind of fundamental religious belief, I think contradictory evidence is everywhere, right? But you have to choose to sort of skim over it. One great example is evolution, and this is why Richard Dawkins spends so much time talking about this, right? Because the reason it's a good example is it's a modern scientific theory which is extremely well established, extremely well understood. I mean, go to any credible university in the world and study biology, you'll hit evolution. And just the time.
And just to be clear, by theory, Shawn, you mean?
I mean like the theory of gravity or germ theory. As in an extremely well established, coherent scientific theory with mountain loads of evidence behind it. And a long time. Now, of course, we could take a brief meander and talk about one of the biggest fallacies that people have about science is this idea that scientists are changing their minds all the time. Like, some new evidence is going to come, and in 5 years' time we're not going to believe evolution anymore. And it's really a complete misunderstanding of how science works. It is true that we do bump into revolutionary stuff. But when we say revolutionary, most often we don't have to throw out all the old textbooks. Most often the old textbooks get slightly updated when science is doing its job. Now, a good example of this happening is, of course, Einstein's theory of relativity, which came on top of Newton's general laws of motion. And Einstein didn't. The thing is, some people think, oh, that's a great example because look, Einstein wiped out Newton. He proved him wrong. He didn't actually prove him wrong. If you follow the equations of Einstein's general theory of relativity, if you follow them to very slow speeds, very slow limits, they become Newton's equations. So he just showed essentially that.
Say about the speeds we're doing now, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. The speeds we're doing now, relativity doesn't matter. The speeds that most people deal with every day, most humans deal with, Newton's laws are perfectly fine. All that Einstein showed is that when you leave this context into more extreme context, the laws change. They're not as straightforward.
Yes.
But when you go back into this, they're perfectly coherent. So. Anyway, that's a complete side note about a little rant about people's misunderstanding of science.
But it is important. If views are changed, it's changed based on evidence, and importantly, of course, the views or beliefs are formed by the evidence.
Yes.
The evidence isn't.
Yeah.
Changed, manipulated, selectively quoted to fit the pre-existing beliefs.
Exactly, yeah. So getting back to my story, I had actually, and I think all religious people do run into evolution and they bump into it.
Yeah.
As long as various religions continue to reject evolution, they will lose their converts to it because it's so well established, right? This is a basic piece of evidence that people are bumping into all the time.
But so can I interject?
Yeah.
See, sometimes, and in some sections of various religions, they've kind of
they've found a workaround.
They've found a workaround. That's perfect. They've found a workaround. The theistic evolutionists, you see, it's like, well, we don't disagree with evolution, but God was still, managing this behind the scenes.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And it's the same thing as we were talking the other day. Galileo was made to recant his view of the universe, essentially the Copernican view. By the Catholic Church, who actually quoted the Bible against his belief in that the Earth is immovable, etc., etc. Now, of course, as science has progressed, like as you discussed evolution, as science progressed, as cosmology progressed, it was becoming harder and harder and harder to refute the Copernican view of the universe. In fact, 100 years after Galileo, it was the accepted view. So the Church quickly had to adjust and say, Psalms and things like this, it's metaphor when they talk about it. They weren't literally meaning the Earth is on pillars and doesn't move. It's all metaphor. You see, and this is the way.
Yes.
This is the way that some of these religions, clearly major cosmological, scientific, etc. Views, which were taken literally, by the way. People forget this.
They were taken literally.
I know Christians say, oh, no one really believed that.
Exactly.
But there you go, 1606 or whatever it was, could have got the year slightly wrong there, the Church quoting the Old Testament against Galileo. Not as metaphor, but as literal.
Yeah.
So
this is
it gives a lie to that idea.
This is the typical religion is very good at this. Very good at their branding and their marketing, right? So what'll happen in 20, 30, 40, maybe 100 years time, when religions have all caught on to evolution and everyone is an evolutionary theist, you know what they'll say? We said it all along.
Yeah.
we said it. Because today, if you approach a Catholic, it depends on how liberal they are. Yeah. And you say, but you know what, your church, the Catholic Church, they didn't understand basic astronomy. Galileo came along and completely revolutionized that. They say, no, we understood all of this all along. This is what we've been saying all the time. Of course, there's a symptom of being in the box, right? Because people grow up in their own environment and think that's the only environment that's ever existed in their own religious views. Right?
Yes, that's right. And then they'll go on to say, but the church is responsible for the universities. They encouraged scientific learning. They didn't stifle it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they'll take the credit for everything.
Yes.
As usual.
Yeah, that's right. And say, and the more, of course, we find about science, it's like, God, the more amazing God becomes. Yeah. You see. Yeah. It's God is even more creative than we thought.
Yeah. So just left up ahead. So This is my introduction point, is that when I was religious, I did bump into contradictory information, but it took something more than just the odd bumping into contradictory information to spark the whole faith crisis, right? And I had already accepted evolution about a year to a year and a half before my major research began. So I was a believing Mormon walking around in Mormon temple garment underwear, believing everything and believing in evolution, and I managed to make that work for a while. So what was it that changed, right, that actually caused me to begin some more serious research? Well, actually, in my case, I was watching a movie that I really enjoyed, which is it's The Karate Kid. It's a remake with Will Smith's son, Jaden Smith.
The remake, shame on you.
I'm young. And the movie has a theme about overcoming fear. And so basically it portrays this young kid. He moves to Beijing and he's bullied by some other kids, right? And so what happens is he decides to go and learn Kung Fu in order to face his nemesis, the bully, right? Yeah. And so, long story short, he trains up, he gets stronger, and right at the end, he's facing his nemesis in a Kung Fu competition. Now, he's almost down for the count. He's been knocked out, and he's lying there on the bed, and everyone's saying, "You've done a great job. You can finish up now, right? You're done. You've done a great job. You can go home with honor, whatever." And he says, "I need to go back." And they ask why, and he says, "Because I'm still scared." And so you could tell that the whole reason he entered into the competition was not necessarily to win the competition, but to conquer his fear. Right. So this movie really touched me at the time, and I actually went for a walk around my house for about an hour and a half after watching the movie. I was really affected by it.
You mean outside?
Yeah.
Around, yeah.
Yeah, just on the streets. And I was thinking about myself and basically my own self-actualization, like my own progress as an individual, and performing introspection. And I was thinking, do I have any great fear within me that I need to overcome? Because I watched this movie about conquering fear. I was really inspired. I want to conquer my fear. Do I have any fear? And after a while of thinking about it, I did realize that I do have a fear, and that is the fear of information that might cause me to reconsider my religious beliefs.
Yeah, wow.
Right. So that was actually a different order from a lot of people. A lot of people first get all the information and then it sort of plunges them into a faith crisis.
Well, yeah. That was much more my story, yeah.
And in my case, it was quite different. I was doing just fine with my own brand of apologetics that believed in evolution and Mormonism. But I had a self-actualization, a realization that I was afraid. I realized that I had a deep-seated fear of information that might contradict. Because religious belief was actually the most important thing in my life at the time. Like, it was everything to me. My beliefs were everything. And so what that led me to conclude after a few weeks of thinking about it is that I need to overcome this fear. And it's kind of that faith in the truth, The truth can withstand indefinite interrogation. You can keep interrogating it and it'll keep being true. Yeah. So I honestly believed Mormonism was true, honestly.
Yeah.
And so I said to myself, you know what? If I study about it, and if it's really true, then it doesn't matter how much I study about it, it's still going to be true and I'll be fine. Right?
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the end. Because obviously, as all of our viewers will know, and as we know, it's Mormonism is basically the second most obviously fraudulent religion in the world, next to Scientology. It's been said, and so I began a period of intense research, just like you did. Yeah. But again, what I was interested to talk about first in this first conversation was what comes before the intense period of research. What happens to you that causes you to start the spiral of Alice in Wonderland jumping down the rabbit hole?
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly.
Yeah. And so I think we've basically nailed it, right? I think we've covered this initial topic. I don't know if you have any other thoughts to add, but I think we should wrap up this first conversation. We can have another.
I think we could. However, I could say like trust a Mormon to gloss over a fantastic original film and just go for the rewrite.
I can sense some lingering Christianity within you.
That's right. That's my anti-Mormon apologetics.
That's right. I can sense some lingering Christianity within you. You know what? Joseph Smith, he gave Christianity an awesome upgrade. Okay.
Well,
you know, one heaven became three,
yeah,
and then the top of the three became another three.
Yeah.
And you get to heaven and you have lots of hot wives instead, you know, instead of just maybe your family.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And you know, we know where heaven is.
Yeah,
it's next to a star called Kolob. That's where God lives. And you know, seriously, it was an awesome upgrade.
Well, that's much better because Christianity, there's no marriage in heaven, so.
Yeah, that's actually what Jesus said, but don't worry about what Jesus said.
That's not the point of it.
When you're a Mormon, don't worry about what Jesus said. Worry about what Joseph Smith said. Yeah. So I think with that, we'll wrap up our first conversation.
Yeah.
To anyone who's listened to this whole conversation, thank you for your patience. It's been a little, maybe, I don't know, we're coming on about an hour.
I'd like to say we hope you've had as much fun as we have, but I know that's not going to be the case.
Yeah,
really.
That's right. Yeah. No, we're doing this just for us, but we'll share it in case someone else wants it.
Exactly.
But yeah, thank you for listening, and hopefully join us soon for another conversation about another topic taken on the same long drive. Take care.